Thank you for staying with us. Now, as we wrap up Africa Month, we focus our attention on the University of Limpopo, which commemorated Africa Day in collaboration with the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture and the Limpopo government, under the theme, The Year of Nutrition. That event will take place at the university's Kgomoeswana Tiro Hall. To talk more on this, I'm now joined by Victor Kgomoeswana, Executive Director of Marketing at the University of Limpopo. Victor, very good evening. Thank you so much for coming onto the show.
Good evening, Hubert. Good to see you again.
The Year of Nutrition is a very interesting theme. Talk to us about how you arrived at this theme.
The theme is more aligned with the theme for 2022 by the African Union. Remember, we are trying to celebrate Africa Month, so the logical thing is to find alignment with what the African Union is focusing on. So it's migration and nutrition. So migration in Africa versus nutrition. And if you just think about it, migration is a big topic right now, globally, but for us in Africa particularly, because certain countries are bearing the brunt of migration. But you can't talk migration without talking security. And security often is not just shelter, it's not just running away from war, it's also being able to earn a living so that you can secure your family and its nutritional security. But now also Africa as an agricultural hub that it could and should be, and whether we're headed in the right direction in that way.
Well, certainly a number of elements to that conversation. Now, one of the things you're also looking at is how you can solve some of Africa's problems.
Yeah.
So I suppose those are some of the problems that you've highlighted. In your mind or based on the work that you've been doing, what are some of the solutions to Africa's problems?
You know, Africa has 20% of the Earth's surface, but only 15% of the world population. The most arable land that has not been developed or that has not been exploited is on the continent. So if we just look at it, Africa can produce enough food to feed the whole world. But as we speak, the level of sophistication with regard to the use of technology, the use of fertilizers, even organic fertilizers particularly, particularly organic fertilizers, employing tractors and things that can increase the productivity in agriculture, those are still the lowest in Africa. Farming on the continent is still mainly subsistence farming, but even with that, it employs the largest number. So a university like ours, which has a very strong agriculture department and a lot of experience because of where it's positioned and its pedigree, is looking at ways of not just good old-fashioned rural extension, which helps people to produce enough food to feed their families, but also finding ways of getting technology in there so that we can improve the productivity, but also looking at other crops that might not necessarily have been on the agenda of Africa. From just things like pyrethrum, if you look at it, used in insecticides, to, liquid fuels, you know, lots of production of plants to make fuel rather than to feed people, but also crops like cannabis, which require a deeper understanding, because there's a lot of misconception about what cannabis and its relatives are about. And as you know, the industry is just growing phenomenally globally. So Limpopo is in that area, thinking about that. But also from a migration point of view, Limpopo is the only province in South Africa that shares a border with 3 other countries, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Botswana, and 3 other provinces of South Africa, which means the movements that we're talking about of people from Zimbabwe, people from Mozambique, people from Botswana into South Africa, all affect the province. So it's those kinds of topics that our motto, finding solutions for Africa, will be looking at tackling.
Well, I'd imagine that one of the challenges that one of the problems that arises, certainly with migration from those 3 countries, are issues of xenophobia. Are those prevalent in Limpopo, or is it as they move towards Joburg and further up?
Interestingly, Afrobarometer conducted a study, and it's not my words, it's theirs, very recent findings where they found that about 51% of South Africans believe that in order to safeguard the livelihoods of South Africans, movement should be restricted. But interestingly, 45% of those surveyed believe that free movement of people, especially in the Southern African Development Community region, which is a lot of countries, 15 countries, 300 million people, should be permitted. And the same study found that in rural areas, Afrophobia is not as prevalent as it might be in dense areas. So it tells you something about the differences between provinces, depending on how dense they are. Because in Limpopo, you find a lot of crop farming, but also animal husbandry. And you come across people from Lesotho who migrated from Lesotho to come and look after livestock, and there's no conflict there.
Well, I suppose the next thing that I'd certainly like to raise is the issue of unemployment, particularly of young people. Now, we do know that agriculture is the biggest employer.
Yeah.
Now, is there an attraction for young people to go into farming or agriculture? Because it almost suggests that in many instances it has very low, or rather lower, startup costs to many other businesses. Yeah. Is that a challenge that you are looking at?
It is a challenge. In fact, we have a partnership with the Archbishop Thabo Makgoba Foundation, and one thing we do every year, we host a lecture. And last year's lecture was not held in 2021 because we had the local government elections, and it was held in January of this year, January, February. And we had Kgomoeswana Mothapo, who's not only a politician and a public representative and a traditional leader, but she's also a farmer. When we organized that, it was one of the first events we organized in contact, in other words, bringing people into a venue. And 70% of the audience in that hall, which is about 250 people, was young people. And the majority of them were our students. And I was surprised how many young women were talking about, we have been doing food production, food gardens with the schools in the community to do our practicals because they are studying agriculture. But they went, she was saying to them, if you were lacking land, come to our community meetings, we'll give you land. They went to attend meetings a few weeks later, and they were actually given land where they can produce farm. So it's becoming more and more attractive, especially because we have a strong agriculture department, and they are looking at applying those. So they are doing it in a very modern way, but they are as young as 18, 19, 20, and they are taking a keen interest in the field. Now,
what's obviously clear is that there are a numerous number of subsistence farmers within the vicinity of Limpopo. Are there synergies between these young people and those farmers? Because they already have land, and the challenge might be how do they increase productivity? The students, the university students, potentially do not have land, but what they have is they have a human capital
technical know-how
and technical know-how to grow farming in those areas.
The Dean of our faculty, Science and Agriculture, gave us a specific mandate to make sure that our students get to work with farmers in the community. Subsistence farming is not actually problematic, Hugo. What is problematic is if you are not able to produce the quality of crops or animals that you can sell to the bigger market. So a Pick and Pay or a ShopRite will buy from anybody because the shortage of stock is there. But the problem is they come to you and say, are you producing according to the quality that we want? A Woolworths, for example, will want no pesticides in your production. So if you drive around Limpopo, going to places like xenophobia and what, you start seeing those tunnels. What do they call them? Hydroponic tunnels. And those, some of the people are subsistence farmers. So subsistence farming is okay as long as you get the technology right and you align it with the downstream market, people who buy the supermarket. And more and more we are seeing a collaboration downstream from the buyers of this produce and subsistence farmers. But of course, the ideal would be to commercialize them as much as possible. Around Muleji, you find people who are still farming part-time, but they are already selling to the supermarket chains.
So final question is, looking into the future, some of the challenges that we are facing are around food supply, primarily because of the challenges in Ukraine, where there is war, and obviously a lot of like wheat, for instance, is eventually not going to make its way down to several countries, including those on the African continent. Is this something that you are looking at doing? Maybe not necessarily wheat, but the opportunities that have arisen from world challenges such as the Ukraine-Russia conflict?
Honestly, we haven't got to that level yet, but as I'm saying already, we were talking about what we can do to improve. But it's definitely something that as a country we have to address, because the shortage or the shortfall as a result of the Ukraine situation is something that a country has to address as a whole. But I agree with you that as much as the war is tragic, as much as it's disruptive for Africa, maybe it will be a wake-up call to make us see that we should be the real breadbasket of the world.
Victor, it's always good to see you. And that was University of Limpopo's Executive Director of Marketing, Victor Kgomoeswana.